Robin Schiller, you were in the Regency Hotel a decade ago when gunmen came looking for Daniel Kinahan. And we've spoken to you before about your experience on that day and having a gun pointed at yourself. Did you ever imagine that a decade later you would be standing in courtroom 11 in the CCJ with Daniel Kinahan just a few feet away from you again?
No, I thought it was very unlikely at the very least. This has been going on for several years now. Investigations have been going on to Daniel Kinahan for a decade. Specifically, this investigation is charged with, and I wouldn't be the only one who seemed doubtful that he may ever actually face a court of law. 10 years passed by, we've both changed a bit. I've gotten older, and Daniel Kinahan certainly looks every bit of his 49 years of age as well. Being in a Dubai prison for the last 4 months certainly hasn't done any favours, but he's back now and awaiting trial, presumably before the Special Criminal Court.
It was quite a dramatic day or weekend, really, of events, Robin, that got him from Dubai to Dublin. We've know how the legal process has played out. The government had to come to agreements with the UAE. Then he had various appeals in the courts in Dubai. And then they send the government jet. Very unusual.
Yeah, the first time it's been used for such an extradition since it was bought a number of years ago. I can understand why it was used, this Dassault Falcon. It's quicker. Like if you look back to when Sean McGovern was extradited in a similar process last year, he was on a different military aircraft that took nearly 24 hours to make its journey. It had to stop twice in Cyprus and in the south of France to refuel before eventually making it to Baldonnel. With Kinahan, he's such a high-profile international prisoner. I presume they couldn't take any chances that there were extra stops and pit stops on the way, and that was one, if not maybe the most primary decision to use that government jet. It's not to give Daniel Kinahan any kind of VIP status, but purely from a security point of view, given the fact that he could have a number of Gardaí on board as well. It was a lot quicker, didn't require fueling stops. I think that was the primary motivation for utilising that jet to bring him back here.
The jet it cost over 50 million euro. It's relatively new. The old Learjet that the government had was pretty much falling apart, if we're honest about it. But the image of going on that jet is as you say, luxury or VIP. Do you have any sense, Robin, of how he would have been treated on that? Is he handcuffed during the flight? How does it work? Is there a lot of Gardaí on the flight that flew over and back?
Yeah, so you would have had a number of different Gardaí on the plane going over and back. You would have had members of the Garda Extradition unit, who are obviously specialists in removing prisoners wanted here back to Ireland. You would have had members of the investigation team from the Garda National Drugs and Organised Crime Bureau, and then you would have had two pilots from the Army Air Corps who operate the plane. Whether we haven't got exact details of whether he'd be restrained or handcuffed on the flight, he is a prisoner, but when he's 30,000 feet in the air, is there necessity to handcuff him? He wouldn't have been deemed a violent prisoner, which sounds unusual given the fact he's so high profile and he's accused of such a serious offence. But in terms of being a violent prisoner who'd be likely to lash out, the chances of that were also very unlikely. So he would have been treated like any other person on a flight. He wouldn't have been subject to any kind of harsh treatments. So I imagine there would have been some small talk on the plane. Daniel himself, he tries to come across at least as a friendly and chatty person. He would have at least tried to engage in some kind of small talk. Whether that would reciprocate or not is another thing. The Guardian on the plane, they're obviously not going to try avoid him for the 8 hours and sit there in complete silence, but they also have to remain professional, and they have a serious job to do, and I've no doubt that they did that as well.
There has been some commentary, Robin, online, I think, particularly of the fact that the government jet was sent, of the fact that the Gardaí and Army seem to have spent money on bulletproof vehicles to transport him. The fact that we've seen those pictures of very heavily armed Gardaí around Dublin city centre and Gardaí wearing masks, disguising themselves. Was all of that really necessary?
I think it actually was when you kind of look at the context of the whole thing. So Daniel Kinahan, he's obviously wanted here and he's been brought back here in charge, but he's also a person who's the subject of a $5 million bounty by the US government and the US Department of State. They also want him. They also want to prosecute him. They want people to come forward with information. So if anything at all happens to him while he's in the custody of Irish officials, it would be an international embarrassment to the state, and it's something they simply cannot afford. And, threat assessments have been carried out. The likelihood of anyone either targeting Daniel Kinahan or trying to free him while he's in the custody of the prison service or Gardaí, it's very, very low, but it's never zero. And they have to prepare for all eventualities. In the very unlikely event that something is tried, they have to be prepared. They have to be able to respond to that. And that requires a significant armed force. When he came to court, he had 6 different 4x4s from the emergency response unit, all heavily armed, kitted out. top cover from the Garda Air Support Unit, Defence Forces being mobilised as well. It does seem a bit over the top, but it's completely necessary to avoid any kind of incident at all where Daniel Kinahan could be targeted or could be freed, or an attempt made to free him.
It was quite extraordinary, Robin, the amount of people, tens of thousands of people following the flight as it came back into Casement Aerodrome. And then you had people lining the streets and the bridges and outside the courthouse with their phones out, almost all of them anyway, trying to get a glimpse of him. He said, I think in one of those podcasts that he's done, that he was being treated like some sort of movie figure. But that was a bit like a movie star arriving into town. It was weird.
It was, yeah, it was. It was unusual. It was a bit crazy, to be honest. When I arrived at the CCJ in Dublin about an hour before his appearance, there's already a crowd of about 30, 40 people. That swelled to easily 150, I'd say, by the time he actually drove through the side gates. There was, a similar enough crowd in Baldonnel for his arrival from that airplane. And even in Portlaoise on Sunday evening when he was brought there by the ERU, there was a significant crowd there as well. I'm not making any opinion of, people, they should or shouldn't be there. Everyone's entitled to if they want in their own time. But it is unusual that you have this kind of fanfare for Daniel Kinahan being brought back. And there's also videos when he left court after his appearance on Sunday evening. There's some people kind of cheering his, departure and saying, "Go on, Daniel," which, whatever about being there and wanting to witness a bit of, Irish history. The kind of cheers from him seemed a bit macabre and a bit bizarre, to be honest.
So take us inside the courtroom. First of all, a few unusual factors with that as well, Robin. This is the middle of August. It is a Sunday evening, after hours. The courts would normally be absolutely vacant. Maybe that suited the Gardaí in some ways, given the high level, the security around this. But take us inside courtroom 11 and set the scene.
Yeah, so as you said there, the courts have been closed since late July, and even on a Sunday, nothing would normally happen. That was the opposite, obviously, on Sunday. So members of the media and Gardaí were permitted access to the court building itself beforehand. You have to go through the first scanner at the front gate and then up to Court 11. Because it is a special criminal court, there's always security measures in place. You have to go through another set of metal detectors, give your details, show your credentials. Some members of the public may have been granted access. They have to hand up their phones and any devices before they can come in. There's obviously a concession made to media to report and use those devices to report. You go in, and the first the Court 11 is one of the bigger courts in the CCJ. So there's two sets of benches on either side when you walk in, 4 rows and 5 rows, I think it is. The first 2 rows were completely taken up by the media, obviously national media here as well, international colleagues as well from the BBC, from Sky News. Then a large number of Gardaí from the investigation team and the Garda National Drugs and Organised Crime Bureau. And then you had a fair amount of plain-clothed detectives, some trying to be, I suppose, discreet on the cover, but you can tell a lot of the time, especially when you're regularly in courts, who was a member of the public and who was, guard trying to fit in or try to be a bit more discreet. And then we were kind of, sat there for nearly an hour waiting for Daniel Kinahan to appear, and that happened shortly after 8 o'clock. At 8:09 p.m. he was brought up, and that's when, the whole fanfare really began.
And strikingly, Robin, among the journalists and the Gardaí, no family, no supporters, and indeed no legal team for Daniel Kinahan.
Yeah, and that was, I suppose, one of the first things that struck out, kind of waiting for Daniel Kinahan to appear. You had the prosecution team, the state solicitors on one side, as they normally are. And even before somebody appears in court, the defendant, you have the legal team, or at least 1 or 2 solicitors on the opposing side of the bench preparing for him to come. There was simply nobody on the defence side for, the hour that we were waiting for Daniel Kinahan. He was brought up at 8:09, and there was still no representation for him there whatsoever. And that became clear then. The state solicitor and the Gardaí said that he has no legal representation at this time. In his own words, Daniel Kinahan said that he's been effectively locked away since Friday afternoon in Dubai. He hasn't had a chance to secure legal representation. He'd hoped that a family member could have arranged that for him while he was in custody. Some kind of mix-up happened, and that hasn't happened yet. So throughout that 40-minute court process yesterday, he was without legal representation, and unusually, I suppose, had to speak a good bit in his own words to get through that process.
Well, it's not like he didn't know this day wasn't coming, or at least he's certainly known it for the last few weeks. And as I was saying, tens of thousands of people were following the plane into Dublin. So if he had a legal team lined up, they would have known where they needed to be and the time that they needed to be there. So it was very strange. And yet, in his back and forth with the judge, he seemed comfortable enough, Robin, representing himself in that moment, at least.
Yeah, and he wasn't, it wasn't like he's being put under any interrogation from the judge when he was in court. The judge was very accommodating to him. You do have a situation where a defendant is without legal representation and certain allowances have to be made of that. And the judge, asked him straight out, where is the legal team? It was explained to him. Daniel Kinahan explained what the issue was and that he hoped to secure representation at some stage. He was very polite in his interactions with the judge. There was a lot of, thank you, Your Honour, thank you so much, please, yes, Your Honour, no, Your Honour. Very polite in interacting with Mr. Justice Patrick McGrath. And that was it for the 14 minutes. It was fairly polite. The times he did have to speak, he conducted himself well. He was very thankful for the judges for explaining the legal process with him. Justice McGrath asked him at one stage if he wanted to appear at the next sitting via video link, and Daniel Kinahan said, well, do I have to decide right now, Your Honour? He was told he did not, and he thanked him again. And I suppose the more interesting interaction from Kinahan was when the subject of bail was broached with him. So under the offence he's charged with, Section 71A, he can only apply for High Court bail. That was explained to him, and Kinahan kind of, with a wry smile, nearly in defeated attitude, at the same time said, we know I'm not going to get bail, Judge, but thank you so much for explaining that, Your Honour. So he's kind of accepted the fact that he's going to be in custody while awaiting presumably what will be a trial and not a guilty plea.
You mentioned the charges there. Explain exactly what he has been charged with for us.
Yeah, so that evidence was given by Detective Sergeant Colin Davidson of the Garda National Drugs and Organised Crime Bureau, and he set out that Daniel Kinahan has been charged with a single offence, and that is under Section 71A of the Criminal Justice Act 2006 as amended, and he is accused of directing the activities of a criminal organisation. Now, that covers an offending period of October 2015 to April 2017, so really the currency and the height of that Hutch-Kinahan feud all those years ago that led to 80 murders on the streets of Dublin. The specifics of that charge haven't been laid out, what exact offences they're linking to. It's understood that a number of different murders, murder attempts, drug possession offences, weapon possession offences will form part of that case, but that hasn't been spelled out in the charge, and he's only facing one single count, as I said, under Section 71A of directing the activities of a criminal organisation.
I mentioned at the top that it's a decade since the Regency Hotel attack and that you were there that day. Daniel Kinahan is 49 now. How did he appear in court? Did he look like a man who has aged well, shall we say?
He didn't, and not to put any slight in him, but he has for the last 4 months spent time in what he described as a shithole in a Dubai prison. He's been under an extreme regime, especially since Friday afternoon. He underwent an 8-hour extradition flight back to Ireland, albeit on a government jet, but still an 8-hour flight and would have taken its toll on anyone. He was dressed when he appeared in this kind of loose-fitting black tracksuit. He had a bit of a stubby grey beard and he put on his glasses, and he certainly doesn't look like a man who's meant to be in charge of a $1.5 billion drugs empire. And he had a bit of a defeatist attitude about him as well. When you see his comments there about bail and knowing he won't be granted bail, being very polite with the judge, but kind of accepting the fact that this is the situation he's in now. He did look fairly worn from the entire process. He's treated nearly in his comments with James English, the podcaster and YouTuber, as a homecoming, but it certainly was anything but, and it's not what he would envisage, I'd say, when he left Ireland initially 10 years ago to escape the Hutch-Kinahan feud.
And after all those kind of court formalities were done, Robin, he was whisked away again to Portlaoise prison, one of the highest security prisons in Europe. Never mind just Ireland. What would have awaited him there?
Yeah, so that convoy from the emergency response unit made its way there shortly after 10 o'clock last night. And like any other prisoner, really, he's checked in, assessments are carried out with him. The government of the prison would normally speak to him, or a senior official, booked in effectively and then taken to his landing. Now, there have been mixed reports about whether or not he will be on his own landing or he will be with other prisoners. My understanding that he will be with other prisoners on landing. I don't think he'll necessarily be mixing with them, but it's not like he has this exclusive wing in the high security prison to himself. And that's effectively going to be his home, at least during the currency of the trial or the court process. We don't obviously comment on anything that could jeopardise a trial or, put any guilt on him or say that he will be found guilty and will be there for the next 20 years. But for the moment, he is a remand prisoner, and that's where he'll be staying for the foreseeable future.
One of the things he's tried, Robin, to suggest in the podcast interview that he has done in recent weeks is this idea that there is some level of a conspiracy against him, in that this is all decided and he won't get a fair trial at the special criminal courts. And one of the things he seemed to underline was this idea that he is not suicidal. Why do you think he was making such a big effort to make that point?
Well, Daniel Kinahan has for years, and not just in the recent comments, he's for years said and put it out that he's been the victim of a state conspiracy. He's a victim of state collusion. All the way back from that, attempt to murder him at the Regency Hotel, he says that the state were involved in that it was some kind of effort for Fine Gael to win that year's general election. He's released rap videos, kind of high quality movie productions, pushing out the narrative that he's a victim of a state campaign against him. He thinks in his eyes he is completely innocent. And he's obviously of the opinion that when he is in custody, the state may try to get at him in some way. Those comments were interesting. It kind of reminded me, not to compare the two, but what happened to Jeffrey Epstein. I'm not saying I know exactly what's going on Daniel Kinahan's mind, but I'd say that was very at the forefront of those comments. Jeffrey Epstein, obviously accused of very serious crimes, was arrested a number of years ago in the US and took his own life in prison. And there have been conspiracy theories that he was murdered to shut him up and prevent him giving evidence against high-profile people. And Daniel Kinahan seems to be the same opinion that something untoward might happen to him in prison, that it may look like self-harm, but that he will be murdered. It's a completely ridiculous suggestion to make of the sort at all, to suggest that the Irish state will try to murder Daniel Kinahan in prison. But that shows, his mind, where his mind is at right now, and what he thinks of the entire state's prosecution of him.
And Robin, as he settles into Portlaoise prison, back in Dubai, he has left behind a wife and children.
Yeah, his wife, Caoimhe Robinson, remains in Dubai. The children do as well. They're currently in school in Dubai, and they seem to be well settled over there, having lived there for the last 10 years. His brother, Christopher Jr., and his father, Christopher Sr., remain over there. They're still subject of this $5 million bounty as well from the US government, but there's been no efforts to apprehend them yet. There was also, as part of that file against Daniel Kinahan, Gardaí also put in a file against his brother, Christopher Jr. No prosecution has yet been directed to him, so he's essentially still a free man. So he still has family over there. There's no indications yet that his wife will come back here. All his assets as well seem to be over there. He has built up a vast property portfolio in Dubai through putting stuff in his wife's name. He obviously has significant cash flow access over there and access to assets. How much he actually has back here in Ireland, is disputed. The Criminal Assets Bureau took a house in Coldwater Lakes. It's a really nice kind of mansion. They took it off what was effectively Daniel Kinahan a number of years ago. It's the only kind of known asset that's been taken off him by the Criminal Assets Bureau in recent years here. So what access he actually has to stuff here isn't quite known, and mightn't be as much as people may see. There's the family home and Oliver Bond Flats, but whether he has access to a large amount of properties here for his wife and family to come home, it's very unclear, and all indications are at this point that they might actually stay in Dubai while he's facing trial here.
And finally, Robin, the process now takes off. It'll build up towards a trial, which will possibly be some time next year, but it'll be about 2 months before we hear from Daniel Kinahan himself again.
Yeah, so his case has effectively been adjourned to October 5th at 2 o'clock in the Special Criminal Court again. It'll just be another formality. You might have an update on his legal representation. You may have the book of evidence ready at that stage to be given to him so he can review the actual case against him. But, this is going to roll on for another few months without any kind of development. There will be an arraignment process next year at some stage. All indications are that he'll plead not guilty, but he might surprise people and admit to it to secure a lighter sentence. If not, he'll go on trial, and that trial could take several months, really, weeks, if not months. I'd expect months. It's a very technical case. It's a vast circumstantial case. There's a lot of phone evidence, an awful lot of phone evidence, attribution evidence that goes along with that. It has to be proven that, the centre of this case are these PGP messages allegedly sent by Daniel Kinahan, and the state has to prove that he sent those messages. And there's, we haven't seen a book of evidence to know exactly what's in it, but I understand there's about hundreds of messages allegedly attributed to Daniel Kinahan and that. So it'll be a very long, arduous technical case. And with that, you'll also have Daniel Kinahan stress testing the case against him. And we're looking at several months here, and it could drag on for another year or two at least.
Okay, for now, Robin Schiller, thank you very much.